Hey there, you're listening to the Not So Breakfast Show with Sasha and Ish. All right, welcome to the Not So Breakfast Show today. This is the podcast for leadership and career development.
Is it the Not So Breakfast Show, or is it the Not So Breakfast Show? What are we doing, Ish? What are we doing with our name?
I don't know. Well, look, we are considering a brand change, a name change. Controversial topic. A lot of people like the Not So Breakfast Show name, but
originally when we talked about doing this podcast, it was like a breakfast show that you'd listen to on the way into work, and it would be a bit of this and a bit of that, bit of how to be a better person, how to get ahead in your career, how to deal with being 50 and all of that. But over time, it's kind of morphed a little bit, yeah?
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think we've got such a wide listener base. We have a young listener base.
We don't know why, but thanks.
Our generation. So we are considering a little bit of a name change, brand moments. And yeah, I think we're going to get some help and support with that as well, which would be good.
And so we're going, you know what, if we really want to help more people and get the message out there about the things that we're trying to share from our experience, then we've had some feedback that maybe having such a rando name is unhelpful. So what's good is that Ish and I have been having an amazing time brainstorming, and all the ones we like are even more rando than the Not So Breakfast Show. So if you've got a suggestion for our show name, let us know. That would be amazing. Thanks.
Yeah, man. DM us or something. But yeah, it'd be quite good to have something when you kind of say it. It's a little bit snappy and it's what's in the box. And yeah, or maybe not. I don't know.
The cool thing is we're getting some young people to help us, and that's, yeah, okay. Young people, mate, don't get me started.
Well, anyway, today we are talking about trading one set of problems for another.
Which might be what we do when we change our name. We might lose all the listeners we've got now, but get some new ones. I love this concept of changing. You solve one problem, but you get another. Tell me more, Ishmael. Go.
Yeah, so I think it's so easy sometimes to look at a situation and go, oh, it's just easier for me to walk away, or it's easier for me to quit, or I'm out. But often what happens is we end up either having a similar set of problems in the next situation, because maybe we took the problem with us, because maybe we are the problem, or you end up just exchanging a problem that you knew for a problem that's now unknown, and it could even be bigger than the one you've got now. And we are all about learning and developing ourselves, and sometimes sitting in the tension, sitting with the problem, resolving what's going on can make a difference to your future, to your success, to your career. Like at the moment, my youngest daughter, she was working and doing some waitressing work, and the manager changed. And as a result, the dynamic of the entire restaurant changed, and she just didn't like it anymore, and she left. But now she hasn't got a job, and she still doesn't have a job. So now she's looking, and I'm kind of like, how bad was it though? I mean, really, you didn't like it when you started, and then you kind of worked it out. And now the new manager came along, and then you didn't like it again. And I was like trying to give her advice. She was wanting to listen to her dad, which she wasn't at the time. But maybe working it through would have been the smarter option, because now you've just got another problem, which is I now have to get another job. And who knows, that manager could be an asshole as well.
It's so interesting. I got a little bit stuck there about when you were talking about the restaurant, and I'm going, I love how you're calling McDonald's a restaurant. That's awesome.
It wasn't McDonald's. No, it wasn't that daughter. It was the other one.
Ah, there we go. There we go. So often when a circumstance changes and we say, oh, I don't like this anymore, and we go to make a switch, sometimes it's just the change that we don't like, because any change is unsettling. So sure, the new manager is not like the old manager, but why would they be? No two people are alike. And maybe the first thing they make a couple of dick moves, but maybe they're just finding their feet. And maybe given time, the situation will resolve itself. How often do we leap from a known problem to an unknown problem that's worse? And so how do we game that out? What are some of the tips or the techniques? So let's use the situation with the unnamed daughter. What if she had been open to your advice, what would you have said to her? Like, how would you have stepped her through the decision making?
I think I would have analyzed the exact situation, what's actually gone on. And I think the reality of what actually has gone on is there was one person now that happened to be the new manager, but one person that she wasn't gelling with. And to your point, they were new. They were still finding their feet. Everything else in that environment was sweet, but the one person was affecting other people in the environment. And as a result, they all started talking, and all of a sudden the issue, I think, got magnified. I heard a podcast the other day, and it was a team, and they were talking about the fact that a lot of people leave a job based on one person. So there's one relationship that gets fractured, and as a result, they quit the job as opposed to just working through it. So it's almost like they end up with all the consequences of this one person. They're the ones that now have to look for other work, rather than maybe trying to reestablish that relationship. Could you fix it, and could you get back to the normality or where you were happier?
And perhaps picking up to dig deeper to say, explain what not gelling looks like. What is the not gelling? If you're not gelling with the person, and sometimes that might be, separate to your daughter's situation, it might be, well, they insist that we do things a different way.
Yeah.
And I always think, well, maybe their way is better or right. And so this is a training opportunity for me. Maybe there's a new standard and I can aspire to reach the new standard. Because often a new manager does come in and say, actually, it's got a bit loose around here and we're tightening up. And people either respond to that or they resist it. So
that's right.
To unpack what is the not gelling, I don't like the way they speak to me. And then unpack that. Is it their tone? Is it that they're rude? Is it? And it may well be, this is not gaslighting. This is not gaslighting anyone. It may be that the situation is untenable. But be really sure by first of all checking in, understanding that anytime there's a change, we often feel disrupted. And that doesn't mean we need to quickly resolve it by getting ourselves out of there. Sometimes we need to sit with it and work out what our best move is, try and analyze, ask ourselves a few more questions.
Yeah. And sometimes within that, it may just be that you're at the point where you just go, well, I just don't want to have that conversation. I don't want to ask any more questions. And I always look at that and kind of go, well, isn't that more on you than them? So there could actually be a solution here where you strengthen the relationship or build the opportunity. And all it would take is some smart questions and maybe a little bit of humility to actually have a conversation with this person where you can build the connection, but you don't want to do that. So all of a sudden it's like, well, it's just easier to quit. But at some point, you're going to have a conversation like that. And the only way to get good at having conversations like that is to have conversations like that. So here you are presented with an opportunity. And we've often said, I think life presents you with the same lesson over and over and over again until you're prepared to learn the lesson. And often if we can just recognize that, what am I supposed to be learning here? If I resolve this, how could that help me if that played out in the future? And it's a really good mindset to be in. Sometimes hard to get into that mindset because of a situation, but it is the right mindset to be viewing situations through.
Yeah, I love the suggestion that we ask ourselves, what are you running from? What are we running from? Because often we're not running from the situation. We're just running from the conversation we know we have to have about the situation. So
That's right.
It's easier just to exit than it is to have the conversation. And I think recognizing that is really important. I think this plays out in relationships. It plays out in our situations with our work colleagues in so many environments.
And I know for myself, early on in my career, and I think I've talked about this on the pod before, but basically I had a manager who I did not gel with. That was personality conflict. I didn't like the style of him telling people what to do, and it wasn't very discussion based. And I remember when he left, I just wanted to just give him an earful. In fact, I think I'd written him a letter that I was going to slip under his door. Just as a last, you. And a work colleague pulled me aside and said, you're going to regret it. And I am so pleased that I never slipped that letter under the door, because he came back and he came back a few years later and he was my manager again. The difference was we got on great the second time around, and he hadn't changed. He was exactly the same as he was prior. The only person that had changed is I had. And it was my ability to actually just build relationships and connections had increased, and I was more happy to have conversations and make things work. And I remember being so nervous about the fact that he was coming back, but within a couple of weeks, I was like, this is awesome. And he ended up becoming one of my favorite managers.
It's really interesting when you live in a small country like New Zealand. You just can't afford to be an asshole ever, even if you are justified and you really felt like he needed to hear what you had to say and I want to give them a piece of my mind. And you step away from that conversation going, I feel amazing because I've just lightened my load, until it comes back later to bite you. And I think if you are in bigger economies, the lesson is not, oh, well, because I'll probably never see this person again, I can shit all over them. It's that it says something about you as a person. So the old classic, when you're thinking about whether you want to communicate a particular point, you say, is it kind? Is it true? Is it necessary? And in your situation, it was true in terms of it was your opinion. It was wholly unnecessary. There was no need to tell your exiting manager what you thought of them. No. And it probably wasn't kind. Wasn't going to, if you had been on the receiving end of that yourself, and I don't suppose that you thought for a minute about what it would be like to be on the receiving end.
No.
Because your focus is on you unleashing what you think.
Yeah, I never played that out in my head. I was like, this will make me feel better in the moment and close whatever loop I thought was open. But the consequences of that one decision, and also I think retrospectively I would have reflected on it at one point and just gone, what a dick move, Ish. Why'd you do that? You had an opportunity to actually build a bridge, build a relationship, strengthen an opportunity, and you didn't take it. And I think sometimes we need to really analyze the feeling that we get in our career. We're feeling like I just hate my job. When you're walking into it and you're just loathing it, is it actually one person, one conversation, one thing you don't want to do? And if you did it, it would just resolve, and that kind of new breath of wind comes through, and you just feel so much better about it.
Oh, you've just brought back this horrendous memory of me as a grown and mature adult. I sent an email once, and it wasn't an email in anger. It was an email in mild frustration, but it was suggesting a way forward to a group of people that I was involved with on a board. And I had misunderstood the deadline for this particular project. I'd only got it wrong by 1 year. So I thought we were months. I thought we were months late on a strategy document. And I was just so frustrated that no one was taking it seriously to get the strategy done. Like the strategy was due 1st of June. We were already in August. And there was just no momentum. And it was absolutely doing my head in. And so I sent an open letter to all of these people with, it was sort of asking questions, but being slightly sort of, we can do better than this, and away I went. This is not that long ago. And people were just genuinely surprised by what I had written. They really did not understand where I was coming from.
Yeah.
And it turned out that I was a year out, that it wasn't the 1st of June in the year that I was in, that the strategy needed to be done. It was the year after that. So in actual fact, we were talking about it in August, well in advance of when it was due. And basically what I did is, I don't think I ruined all of the relationships, but I certainly made myself look like an absolute crackpot who was uptight. And I just really got that one wrong. And I had to do a lot of work to walk back from it.
Yeah.
And I think about that a lot. I don't like thinking about it. It gives me hives because it was a mistake.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like you had written that thing and didn't send it. I sent this. Big error. I just sort of thought harder, because what I thought was a problem, I had now exchanged for another problem, which is that I'd really broken down unintentionally some of the relationships between us. What I do know is that while I can occasionally wake up in the middle of the night with adrenaline shot to my heart remembering that email, I'm really confident that almost no one else remembers that email.
Right.
Because it's just kind of an email amongst 25 other emails they got that day. And at the time, it might have been a big thing, but we can always recover from those situations.
Yeah.
We can always face up and come good. If you've sent a terrible thing in your life, it's all good. We can move on.
Yeah, totally.
But better to not send it.
Oh, exactly. And, just your ability to be able to reflect back on a situation like that is uncomfortable, but kind of go, what would I have done differently? How could I have approached that? How could I have not got into that situation in the first place? And start applying that to different situations, because that's where the learning is. If you just keep doing it over and over again and keep regretting it, you're not learning the lesson, right? And again, I think you just get presented with the same lesson over and over and over till you learn it. So that is great. The fact that you go back to it and relive it, regardless of whether they are thinking about it or not, it's that prompt, right? It's that little wee kind of prick in your arm that just says, oh, shouldn't have done it that way, not going to do that again.
Prick in my arm, prick on my podcast, reminding me of my failures. Thanks, Ishmael.
All right, so maybe if you're starting to get to that point where you're getting a bit of angst, a bit of anxiety, there's something that's happening and you're just like, it'd just be easier to walk away. Is there an opportunity to view it from a different perspective? So we talked about the fact that I didn't unpack the impact that could have had on the person that was reading it, but I could have probably taken the opportunity to actually look at it. How does it affect the other stakeholders in the relationships that you have? How does it affect this group? How does it affect that group? And all of those little perspective changes just make it so much easier when you look at it, not just done a gut reaction, but you've actually done I'm feeling this way. I've looked at it from all these different angles, and here's what I'm going to do about it, which is really, I guess, that gap between stimulus and response, right, Sash?
Yeah, choosing your response. Tony Robbins says, in the moments of decision, your destiny is shaped. Do I send the email? Should I stay or should I go? What are my options in this situation? Like our reptilian brains, when we're under pressure, we're either going to fight, flight, or freeze. That's not the best headspace to surface and come up with as many possible potential solutions. So we often end up in binary thinking, where we go at stay or go.
Yeah.
I'm in this marriage or I'm out of this marriage. I'm in this job, I'm out of this job. Rather than saying, if I were to stay, what would I need to change about myself, or what would I need to change about my husband, or what would I need to change about my situation in order to make it tenable for me? And that's a different question to be asking yourself, and say, well, before I go, why don't I give it a try? Why don't I try X, Y, Z? Sort of walking around the problem, walking around the potential solutions, and being really careful that we don't prejudge for another person how they will or won't respond. So if you have a situation with a colleague and you go, well, I could talk to them, but it won't work because they never listen. Just recognize that you are already cutting off the opportunity for them to participate in a productive and positive way with you. And I don't think that's fair.
Yeah. And I think there's so many multiple ways to look at a situation. And sometimes if you are looking to walk away, and sometimes it is right to walk away or quit, but have you exhausted every opportunity that you had, or have you exhausted every perspective to look at this situation? Because there is a learning in here somewhere. And if you can resolve it, it will pay off. I promise you it will pay off. It may not pay off in the short term, but the skill that you learned just then, or the experience that you had, that you created this negative and turned it into a positive, that's what you want to do. That's what careers are built on. Another thing you could do is just do a simple pros and cons list. Is this just a 40s, 50s age group thing, Sash? I don't know, like a simple pros and cons, like, what are the positives of this? What are the negatives of this? How could it play out? And kind of look at both the pro. What does it pro even stand for? Pros and cons.
Prostitutes and convicts.
Good. Prostitutes and convicts. That's what I thought it stood for as well. But yeah, the pros is the positives. What's good about my situation right now? What's going really well? List. What's negative? List. And then look at your list And are those things equal, or does one weigh out the other one? And then from your cons list, how many of those could you resolve if you wanted to resolve them?
And a recognition that life is not perfect. So we're compromising all the time. No decision gives us perfectly everything that we want. But when you play it out, you end up saying, what's the lesser of two evils? Or what's the option I can live with the most? We often say to people, pick your poison, because there's no great solution here. You're going to either have to do X, and that's going to be a little bit sucky, or you're going to have to do Y, and that's going to be a little bit sucky. So which one is it? You can either stay out of shape, or you can feel the pain of some exercise. You get to choose. You can either have to invest an hour in cooking a delicious meal, or you can have takeaways that you complain about. Pick your poison. Which way do you want it to go? And I think what's really challenging about the environment that we live in now is that everything is possible. We can have anything or everything that we want. And so we look at Instagram feeds and it feeds us everybody in their perfect state. So we can end up feeling really disappointed with things that are actually really good. And so it's so important to come at stuff from gratitude. I think we have this particular challenge going on at the moment, and it's the most ridiculous thing. So we are very blessed for my birthday, my 50th birthday. We are going to be able to spend some time in Europe, and we're going to have a few days in Paris as a family. Amazing. So we have to decide what we're going to do. And so we've got the opportunity. I said, does anybody want to go to Disneyland in Paris? Now, I know that sounds ridiculous. People go, how can you go to Disneyland while you're in Paris, the city of love and all of that? But it's an option. And so a couple of the kids say, yes, we're going to do that. A couple of us are not going to do that. I'm in the go to Disneyland, right? Just go and get that. So we were all sorted on that. So I said the other day to Chris and Jordan, well, what are you going to do while we go to Paris Disneyland? And Chris said, Jordan and I will probably just hire a Lamborghini and drive around Paris. Now, he's not going to hire a Lamborghini, right? But it was just like making a joke. But instantly, Tiger's like, oh
I want to do that.
What? Oh, eh?
We'll be right back.
If there was one skill that could double your income, advance your career, and increase your ability to influence, it is the skill of presenting. Whether it's on stage, in the boardroom, or at a job interview, the 30-Minute Presenter program will help take you to the next level. So check out our Instagram page, click the link in the bio, and get started on the 30-Minute Presenter program.
Sounds like a good option. And suddenly you might be thinking, oh, so stink. I've got to go to Disneyland in Paris. Right? Now, that might seem like a silly example, and it's possible that we won't even do any of those things. But I think it illustrates how easy it is to end up being disappointed because we can't do all of the things all of the time. So how does that play out in your context? You are blessed with the opportunity to go and buy some new linen for your bed. And so you go and look at 2 duvet covers that you love, but you can't have them both. So even though you buy one that you love, you come home with a little bit of sadness for the one you left behind. And I think this is robbing us of some joy, right? You get to choose roles. And here's a job and a project you can work on, but that means saying no to a different project. And you end up feeling just a little bit sad that you didn't. And I'm like, how have we come to this place that things we should be so grateful for, running water coming out of a tap in our kitchen, that should just be a constant source of joy and gratitude to us, but we kind of end up feeling a little bit regret for what we don't have. And I think we need to be really careful and guard against that all the time. All the time be living in gratitude for what we have.
Yeah, and all the guys that listened to this podcast that switched off when you started talking about duvets and can only think about Lamborghinis, it's okay, we'll get you back in a minute. I think when it comes to problems as well, because we see the highlights of people's lives on social media and don't really get a real insight into what's going on, there's sometimes a comparison thing. And so we don't see the problems. We talked about this in The Invisible, right? We don't see under the waterline of the iceberg all of the stuff that's going on. We only see that sort of that top 10, 20%. And so sometimes when we've got our problem, we might be comparing it to another situation and go, oh, I bet you that situation's better. But often when you get into that situation, it's just as bad. It's just another set of problems that the person has, but you're not seeing it. In fact, I've someone I know at the moment, their relationship is broken up. And it just completely blindsided
It's not me.
It's not
so
Sasha.
You know. It's not
just
me.
for the record, Sasha and Chris, all good.
Sorry, back to you, Ish.
But the reality of what's now happened was not a reflection of what I was seeing. Like, it completely blindsided me. I just had no idea that that was even going on. So sometimes what we see is only our perception of reality. So even the person that you are having the issue with, chances are there is a whole lot of shit that they are dealing with, a whole lot of stuff that's going on, that if you had that perspective, would you react exactly the same way? Or sometimes it's quite good to actually go, you know what? Thinking about their life, that must be really crappy, all of these things that are going on. And it may just give you a little bit of empathy to give you a bit of tolerance to then have a conversation. And whether that's true or not, sometimes that view or that slant on the perspective can help you push through, have the conversation, deal with what it is you need to deal with.
Totally. It's that classic be kind. Nobody knows what another person is going through. And I don't think it's inauthentic of your friend to not necessarily have signaled on Instagram what was happening for them. Because, you know, the posts that do come up on Instagram where someone takes a photo and goes, feeling a bit sad today. And they just go, oh, why? Why? What's going on for you? And they go, oh, can't say. Like, that's not helpful either, right? That's annoying. So it's, some of these things do come as a shock to us.
One other thing that you can do, and being a bit of a, overthinker at times on certain things, is just do like a what's the worst that can happen list. Like, just write it down, like the worst scenario that could completely happen here, and just write it out, because sometimes in writing it out, it just gives it presence, it gives it a voice. So rather than you running the whole thing over and over of every different scenario, just think of the worst one. What is the worst scenario that's going to happen if I do that? Write it down. And actually sometimes writing it down and then going back to it, you kind of go, yeah, it's not that bad. Or if it is really bad, well, at least you might be able to put some coping strategies in behind it.
Often when we do this exercise, we go, what's the worst thing that could happen? I can play it right out to the very worst. So the worst thing for me is not that I die, it's that someone that I care about dies. So I'm going, what's the worst thing that could happen while we are catching that cheap train, because I don't want to pay the Disney money for the bus. I'm going to buy a cheap train and I'm going to go to Paris. What's the worst thing that could happen? Oh, the cheap train could derail and we could all die. And then I think, what's the cost of not living? What's the cost of just living so small, or the cost of not releasing our children to go and have adventures in the world, of keeping them close to us to satisfy our needs, but not actually seeing them achieve their full potential and flying and all of that. So sometimes we can come up with the worst thing and it seems really bad, but then also do the flip of that. And if the flip of that is we just say to our kids, hey, we only had you so you would stay living with us forever because we're scared of what's going to happen when you leave home, you realize how ridiculous that is and how you want them to go and to fly, as an example.
Yeah, definitely.
Not that I'm worried about anything that's happening in our life with like one of our children going to live overseas or anything like that.
All right, so that's been our discussion on exchanging one set of problems for another. Maybe the situation you're not seeing is worse than the one that you're in now. Maybe not. Or maybe there's a lesson that you're supposed to be learning right now. And if you don't learn that lesson, you're just going to take it to the next problem. Or maybe there's an opportunity for you to develop a skill or have a conversation or just deal with something that needs to be dealt with that can just resolve, breathe new life into a situation. And, I guarantee you're not going to sit there one day and go, you know what, I wish I'd never had that conversation with that person and that positive result happened. Like, you're not going to. And even if you do have the conversation that ends up negative, good on you for facing it. At least you've got the absolute truth that they were an asshole and it wasn't you. So I went to Whitney Houston last night, Sash.
Reborn. Back from the dead.
Yeah, not the original Whitney, obviously, but whatever, the reincarnation of Whitney was awesome. Like, the vocals were amazing. It was just all the bangers, man. Like, I Want to Dance with Somebody, and when that came on, I was just like, that's the song. That was the one I was waiting for the whole night. I kept going to Joe, when's the song coming on? When's the song coming on? But yeah, it was so much fun. And it was just at this tiny little theatre, and she got off the stage and then walked right down our aisle, which was pretty cool. And Joe's like, film it. So I'm like filming like Whitney, like right there, like right in front of me. It was so much fun.
So cool. Yeah. That the pipes to sing those songs are amazing.
Oh.
I think it's a good thing that you and I can't sing like that. Can you imagine how insufferable we'd be?
Well, that could give us a name for the podcast. It'd be some sort of musical...
Insufferable.
Karaoke.
Yeah.
Job karaoke. Career karaoke. Oh, God.
Career karaoke. I love it. If you think that's a terrible idea, let us know.
I think it's a terrible idea, so.